I drove into fog that swallowed sound, and at first it felt like relief. The kind that settles in when the world finally quiets down, when the engine hum softens and the wind fades and even your own breathing seems distant. But within seconds I realized this silence wasn't absence. It was pressure, thick and heavy, pressing inward as if the fog wasn't just obscuring the road, but actively compressing everything inside it. The headlights cut weak tunnels through the gray, beams dissolving a few feet ahead as if erased, and the tires rolled on without protest. No hiss on wet pavement, no crunch of gravel, just motion without feedback, and I turned the radio knob instinctively, craving any proof that sound still existed, only to feel my stomach drop when the click made no noise at all, the dial spinning silently beneath my fingers like it was no longer connected to anything real. I snapped my fingers near my ear, hard enough to sting, and felt the vibration travel through my bones but heard nothing, not even a dull thud. And that's when the fear sharpened, because this wasn't deafness. It was selective, deliberate, like the fog had decided sound was inefficient and removed it from the equation. The road markings faded next, yellow lines dissolving into the gray until I was steering by instinct alone, and I slowed down, pulse pounding, watching the speedometer needle hover without ticking, frozen between numbers, and when I tapped the dashboard in frustration, the impact felt wrong. Cushioned, as if the interior of the car were packed with dense foam instead of air. A shape loomed ahead, barely darker than the fog itself, and relief surged through me at the thought of another vehicle, another person trapped in this silence with me. But as I drew closer, the shape resolved into a road sign, its metal pole bent at an angle that suggested force rather than weather, and the sign face was blank, stripped clean except for deep grooves etched into the surface, like something had tried to claw words into it and failed. I rolled past it slowly, eyes straining, and that's when I noticed the fog wasn't moving around me at all. No swirling, no drifting, just holding its shape perfectly. A static mass that parted for the car and sealed behind it instantly, erasing the road I'd just traveled like it had never existed. My chest tightened as I realized how complete the silence was, how even internal sounds seemed muted, my heartbeat dull and distant, my breath shallow and unreal, and I wondered with a spike of panic what would happen if I screamed here, if the sound would die in my throat or be taken the moment it left me. The first whisper came not through my ears but through pressure, a subtle change in the density of the air beside me, and I jerked my head toward the passenger seat, heart racing, because I knew without hearing it that something had spoken, and the knowledge of that without the sound was more terrifying than any voice could have been. I told myself to turn around, hands tightening on the wheel, but when I tried, the steering felt resistant, not locked, just heavy, like pushing against water, and the car continued straight ahead, obedient to a road I could no longer see, and the fog ahead seemed to brighten slightly, not clearing but deepening, layers unfolding like depth without distance. A vibration traveled up through the tires, rhythmic and deliberate, and I realized it was mimicking footsteps, pacing me just outside the headlights, and I knew then that whatever was out there didn't need sound to communicate. It needed proximity, awareness, attention. The fog thickened again, and the interior lights flickered on without my touching them, illuminating the cabin in a harsh white glow. And in that reflection I saw my own face, tense and pale, but something else too, a second outline where my breath should have fogged the glass, a shape forming and collapsing in time with movements I wasn't making. My phone buzzed suddenly in my pocket, the vibration violent in the silence, and I fumbled it out with shaking hands. the screen lighting up to show an incoming call with no name, no number, just a solid gray bar where information should have been. And when I answered, pressing the phone to my ear, the vibration stopped, replaced by nothing. And somehow that nothing felt full. The road dipped sharply, and the car descended smoothly, too smoothly, the fog ahead glowing faintly from below now, and I understood with cold clarity that I wasn't driving through weather anymore. I was driving into something contained, an enclosed system where sound was unnecessary, where communication happened through pressure, alignment, presence. Figures began to appear at the edges of my vision, silhouettes emerging only when I didn't look directly at them, pacing the car, matching speed effortlessly. And each time my gaze flicked toward them, they softened, blurred, dissolving back into fog, as if they existed only in the space attention hadn't claimed yet. I felt a sudden urge to speak, overwhelming and irrational, the need to make noise, any noise, to prove that sound still belonged to me. And I opened my mouth and forced out a shout, my throat tightening painfully, and I felt the vibration tear through my chest and jaw, but the fog absorbed it instantly, the effort vanishing without echo or feedback, leaving behind a hollow ache where my voice should have been. The realization hit me then, heavy and suffocating. That sound wasn't being swallowed by the fog, it was being stored, compressed, held, and the thought of all those lost noises, all those screams and engines and voices trapped somewhere just out of reach, made my skin crawl. The headlights flickered once, twice, and in the brief darkness I saw the truth of the place. The fog layered thick with impressions of mouths open in silent cries, hands pressed outward as if against glass, faces stretched and distorted by pressure, and when the light snapped back on the fog, looked smooth and empty again, as if daring me to doubt what I'd seen. The road ended without warning, dissolving into nothing, and the car rolled to a gentle stop on unseen ground, the engine cutting out on its own, and the silence deepened further, so complete it felt like gravity, pinning me in place. And I knew then that movement was finished, that this place wasn't about travel but collection. The pressure beside me increased, the passenger seat dipping as if someone sat down, and I didn't look, couldn't look, because I understood instinctively that seeing wasn't required anymore. That presence alone was enough, and a familiar vibration pressed gently against my ribs, shaping words without sound. Release, it conveyed, and I knew what it meant. Knew it wasn't asking for breath or voice, but for resistance, for the instinct to push back against silence, and I felt tears slide down my face, the sensation muted and distant, as I realized how tired I was of carrying noise, of fighting the endless demand to speak, to explain, to be heard. The fog pressed closer inside the car now, filling the space between moan. NTS, and I felt my thoughts begin to soften, edges dissolving, words losing their urgency. And in that quiet collapse I understood the final truth of the fog, that it didn't swallow sound to harm, it swallowed it to keep, to preserve everything that had ever been said too late. When the fog finally receded, hours or days later, I was parked on the shoulder of a familiar road, dawn breaking clean and loud around me, birds calling sharply in the trees, engines roaring past, the world brimming with sound again, and I laughed in relief, shaking, grateful, until I tried to speak. When I realized no sound came out, the panic didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, like cold seeping through fabric, because my mouth still moved the way it always had. My chest still rose with breath, my throat still tightened with effort, yet the world gave me nothing back. No echo, no vibration, no resistance, just the indifferent continuation of birdsong and passing engines that proved sound still existed everywhere except me. I tried again, harder this time, forcing air through my lungs until my vision spotted at the edges, and still nothing emerged, not even a whisper. And the worst part wasn't the silence itself, but the realization that I could hear perfectly fine, that the fog hadn't taken my hearing, it had taken my contribution, removing me from the equation of noise like an unnecessary variable. People began to notice something was wrong as I stumbled toward the road, waving my arms, my movements frantic and clumsy, and a driver slowed, rolling down his window to ask if I was okay, his words sharp and painfully loud in my ears, and I answered him instinctively, relief surging, only to see confusion spread across his face as my silent mouth formed words that never reached him. He frowned, leaned closer, asked again, louder this time, and when I still couldn't respond, he shook his head and drove off, the sound of his tires fading cruelly into the distance, and I stood there shaking, understanding dawning fully now that without sound I wasn't just muted, I was diminished, harder to register, easier to ignore, already beginning to blur at the edges of other people's awareness. As the morning wore on, I noticed something else, something subtler and far more unsettling. The silence around me wasn't constant, it pulsed. Faint pressure waves brushing past my skin when people spoke nearby, when doors slammed, when horns blared. And each time that happened, I felt a tug inside my chest, a gentle inward pull, like something resonating sympathetically with the noise I could no longer make. The fog hadn't let me go, it had relocated. I made my way home in a daze, the world loud and normal and unbearable, every sound too sharp, too aggressive, and yet layered beneath it all, I felt that same dense quiet from the road, coiled inside me like a held breath that refused to release. And by the time I closed my front door behind me, I understood with chilling clarity that I was no longer outside the system I'd driven into. That night I dreamed of pressure instead of images, of weight settling slowly across my ribs, of vibrations pressing against the inside of my skull, shaping meaning without language, and when I woke I felt heavier, fuller, as if something intangible had accumulated inside me while I slept. I discovered the change by accident. A glass slipped from my hand in the kitchen and shattered against the floor, the sound sharp and violent, and as it happened, I felt a sudden release, a rush of warmth spreading through my chest, and before I could stop myself, I gasped, a soft, involuntary sound tearing free from my throat. I froze. Slowly, deliberately, I spoke a single word, testing it, barely daring to hope. Sound came out, weak, hoarse, but unmistakably real. The relief hit me so hard my knees buckled, but it lasted only seconds, because as the echo of my voice faded, I felt that familiar inward pull again, stronger this time, and the sound I'd made didn't feel gone. It felt transferred, shifted from my control back into that compressed, waiting silence inside me. That's when the pattern became clear. I could speak, but only if sound was being taken from somewhere else. The more noise around me, the more pressure built inside my chest, and when that pressure peaked, I could release it briefly, converting stored silence back into sound, borrowing my voice against a balance I didn't control, and every time I did it, I felt the fog tighten its hold, as if pleased with the exchange. I tested it obsessively after that, turning on music, standing near traffic, immersing myself in crowded places, feeling the pressure swell as conversations overlapped and machines roared, and when it became unbearable I would step aside and speak, whispering just to feel the release. the sounds spilling out of me thin and pale like something recycled too many times. But silence changed too. Rooms felt emptier after I spoke, quieter in a way that lingered unnaturally, as if something had been skimmed off the top of the soundscape, and people sometimes paused mid-conversation, frowning, asking if anyone else felt like the room had gone dead for a second. And I learned quickly to stop apologizing, to stop explaining, because explanations require sound, and sound always came with a cost. The fog wasn't swallowing sound anymore. It was outsourcing the storage. To me, the realization hollowed me out because I began to understand why it had let me leave the road, why it had returned me to a loud, ordinary world instead of keeping me sealed inside its silence. Because the fog didn't need drivers anymore. It needed carriers. Weeks passed and the pressure inside me grew easier to manage, my body adapting the way bodies always do, finding new baselines, new tolerances, and I hated how natural it began to feel. How quickly I learned when to speak and when to stay quiet, how to bleed off excess silence in controlled ways so it wouldn't rupture out of me at the wrong time. Sometimes, late at night, when the world grew quiet on its own, I could feel the fog stirring restlessly inside me, dissatisfied. And I learned to fear true silence more than noise, because when nothing fed the pressure, it began to push outward instead. That was when the whispers started. Not sounds, not voices, but impressions pressing against my awareness, shapes of meaning without words, urging me towards certain roads, certain places where fog lingered a little too long in the mornings, where sound behaved strangely, where people complained about the quiet feeling heavy. I resisted at first, clinging to the idea that I was still choosing, that awareness gave me leverage, but resistance made the pressure spike painfully, migraines blooming behind my eyes, my breath hitching as if the air itself had thickened again, and I began to understand that the fog didn't punish disobedience directly, it destabilized. Eventually I drove again, not far, not deliberately, just following the pull one night when the pressure became unbearable. And when I saw the mist creeping across the asphalt ahead, my hands shook on the wheel, dread and relief tangling together so tightly I couldn't tell them apart. As I entered the fog this time, sound didn't vanish, it thinned. The world muted gradually, gently, like a volume knob being turned down with care, and I felt the pressure inside me ease, settling into a steady hum that felt almost like comfort. I didn't stop the car. I didn't need to. The fog recognized me. It parted slightly. Not fully, just enough, and I felt something pass between us, a transfer so smooth it barely registered, and when I emerged on the other side, the night sounded normal again, crickets chirping, tires humming, my own breath loud and alive. But I knew the truth then, in a way that left no room for denial. I wasn't lost on that road. I was recruited. Now sometimes, when sound dies suddenly in a room, when conversations falter and people glance around uneasily, when fog rolls in thicker than it should and swallows more than just visibility, I feel lighter, emptier, relieved. And somewhere out there, another driver is gripping the wheel, heart pounding, wondering why the world has gone so quiet. I never warned them. After that night, the fog never fully left me, even when the sky was clear and the air sharp with sound, because once you felt silence behave like a substance, you stop believing it's just the absence of noise. You start understanding it as something that moves, that gathers, that waits for somewhere to settle. And I became acutely aware of how often the world creates pockets for it without realizing what it's inviting in. At first it was subtle, moments so small I could have dismissed them if I wanted to lie to myself. Conversations trailing off mid-sentence, laughter ending a fraction too early, rooms feeling inexplicably hollow even when full of people, and every time it happened, I felt that familiar easing in my chest, the pressure bleeding off like air escaping a valve, and I knew without looking that the fog had fed again. I tried to isolate myself to limit my exposure, but silence isn't something you can hoard or hide from. It leaks through cracks in daily life, through pauses and hesitations and moments of reflection, and I began to notice how modern life produces silence in bursts. Elevators between floors, loading screens, waiting rooms. Split second after a call ends before the line goes dead, and each one tugged at me gently, insistently. The fog wasn't demanding anymore, it was optimizing. I started to sense other carriers, though I never saw them clearly, just impressions at the edges of crowded spaces. People who flinched when rooms went quiet, who breathed a little easier when noise surged back, who avoided eye contact during lulls as if afraid of being recognized. And sometimes, just sometimes, our gazes would meet across a gap in conversation, and I'd feel a faint resonance, a shared pressure that told me we were part of the same quiet infrastructure. None of us spoke about it. We didn't need to. The fog didn't want witnesses who talked. It wanted conduits who blended in. My dreams changed again, evolving from pressure and fog into vast echoing chambers where sound arrived in waves and was catalogued, compressed, routed along invisible channels, and I saw myself there not as a prisoner, but as a junction, silence flowing through me on its way somewhere else. And I woke from those dreams with a strange mix of dread and purpose that made my hands shake. The worst part was how reasonable it all began to feel. Sound, after all, is chaos, constant, overwhelming, and silence is relief, structure, containment, and the fog wasn't erasing voices or screams or music, it was redistributing them, smoothing out excess, preventing overload. And once that logic took hold, I understood how easily someone could convince themselves this was necessary, even benevolent. That's how it gets you. Not by terror, but by usefulness. The first time I actively helped, it still makes me sick to think about. Not because I didn't know what I was doing, but because I did, and I chose efficiency over conscience. Standing in a hospital corridor late at night where grief hung heavy and raw, where sobs ricocheted off sterile walls, and feeling the pressure spike violently inside me as if the fog itself was straining. I stepped into an empty stairwell and spoke softly, releasing just enough sound to stabilize myself. And when I returned, the corridor felt muted, the crying dulled to exhausted whimpers, people breathing easier without knowing why. And I told myself I'd helped them, that I'd given them rest. But deep down I knew I'd made it easier for the fog to take what it wanted without resistance. After that, the requests became clearer. Not words, never words, but directional impulses, gentle nudges toward places where sound pooled dangerously. Protests, concerts, disaster sites, anywhere noise tipped toward rupture. And each time I complied, the pressure inside me eased faster, cleaner, rewarding cooperation in the only currency that mattered. I tried to refuse again, once, truly refuse, staying home during a storm of sound that rattled the city, sirens and alarms screaming into the night, and the pressure built so violently I collapsed to the floor, vision blurring, ears ringing with phantom silence so dense it felt louder than noise, and I understood then that the fog didn't enforce obedience. It enforced balance. If I didn't go, the silence would still need somewhere to settle, and it would settle in me. So I went. I learned the routes instinctively, streets where fog lingered unnaturally even in summer, underpasses where sound warped, intersections where echoes arrived late or not at all. and I realized these weren't random anomalies. They were access points, thin places where the system bled through, and people passed through them every day without ever knowing how close they were to being noticed. Sometimes I'd catch a driver slowing, eyes narrowing, sensing something wrong with the quiet, and I'd feel a pang of something dangerously close to guilt because I neigh. What waited beyond that awareness, and I knew I wouldn't warn them, because warning would require sound, and sound always had to be paid for. The fog began to trust me. I felt it in the way the pressure stabilized faster, in the way silence moved more smoothly through me, in the way my dreams stopped showing cages and started showing maps. Vast networks of quiet threading through cities and highways and airspace, connecting fog banks and stairwells and waiting rooms and roads that swallowed sound whole. I saw how big it was then. Not a single fog, a system, ancient, adaptive, patient. Silence has always had to go somewhere. We just never asked where. Now, sometimes when I speak, my voice sounds wrong to me, slightly hollow, like it's passing through an extra chamber before reaching the air, and I wonder how much of it is really mine anymore. How much has been filtered, optimized, archived. I still drive at night. I still avoid heavy fog when I can. But sometimes when the pressure builds and the world grows too loud, I find myself turning toward it instead of away. Headlights cutting into the gray, heart steady now. Resigned but alert, because I know the truth no one ever tells you. The fog doesn't swallow sound by accident.